Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. I can't compete with an artist for visual presentation. Somebody should have warned me. Last week I received this email in my in-basket, and it said from a famous hospital in the Boston area, they're having the World Medical Innovation Forum where generative AI is revolutionizing healthcare. And generative AI has arrived. Healthcare will never be the same. It's redefining care pathways, reducing workloads, accelerating drug discovery, and cleaning your teeth at the same time. I was a bit skeptical about these things because I've been working in the medical field for about 50 years, and I haven't noticed this revolution that is being promised at this meeting upcoming soon. So what I wanted to do was quickly review a little bit of the real progress that people have made in healthcare. So this was a paper by Di Jin, one of my students from about 3 years ago. He's now working at Amazon Research. And he had the idea of taking the US medical licensing exam and compiling a list of sample questions and practice questions and their correct answers and seeing how well we could do in answering them. He did the same thing for a Chinese language medical exam of the same sort and for a simplified Chinese medical exam of the same sort. And what you see, if I can find my pointer, is that we were getting about 37% correct answers on the English exam, 42% on traditional Chinese, and the simplified Chinese apparently was an easier test. So we were doing better on that. This is not very close to being good because the questions had 4 possible answers. They were multiple choice, so if you guessed at random, you would get 25%. So this is not all that wonderful. Here's an example. It's a presentation of a case like this, and then here are the 4 answers that you might choose. And if you're knowledgeable about medicine, presumably you would choose the right answer most of the time. Now here's what's interesting. ChatGPT came out in November of 2022, and by February of 2023, this group applying ChatGPT to this data set, in fact to our data set plus some others that they built, was getting at or near the passing threshold, 60%. So that's what we demand of students in order to be certified as being allowed to go treat patients. So that was February of 2023. By July of 2023, competitors of OpenAI from Google published an article in Nature, not a shoddy place to publish, in which they showed that by extending the training, not just from our data set, but some additional data sets, and by paying more attention to prompting and instruction tuning, and by using a yet larger model. ChatGPT was about a little under 200 billion parameters. They were using one that's about 2.5 times as large. And they were getting a state-of-the-art performance and actually passing at a level that would be considered passing for a human being. And so this got a lot of traction, and everybody said, well, you know, doctors are passé, we're just going to go to ChatGPT and answer, or MedPalm, and answer all the questions. And it does really well. So for example, if you ask it a question like how long does it take for a newborn's jaundice to go away, it gives you a pretty nice, concise explanation of that question. So it's not only able to answer multiple choice questions, it's able to answer so-called open questions as this one. And in fact, if you look at the historical trend, the paper I showed you of ours was roughly in this category, and they were up in the 67% accuracy. And then they got even better with a second version of the system where they were up to about an 85% accuracy on various other systems as well. So this is all good, right? I'm excited. I work in this field. I want progress to happen. Oh, I should show you this. So let's see, does that work? No. Anyway, sorry for that slide. They're up to like 85% if you watch that arrow move up. So if you look in PubMed, which is the repository of medical publications, you see that these types of models, or this particular model, is being applied to genetic discovery. It's applied to urology, emergency medicine, multi-specialty recruitment, etc. Now, here's the thing that bugs me. I know exactly how these systems are programmed. I've written programs like this myself. I don't have the computational resources to learn a 540 billion parameter model, but in principle, I know how it works. And the way it works is unbelievably simple. So I give it an input like the chicken crossed the, and I want an output. And I train my model to give me that output. The model initially starts off at random, so it's going to give me garbage outputs, but then I feed it back and I say, no, that was wrong. Adjust all those 540 billion parameters in order to make it more likely to get a correct answer. And I do this for about 1 trillion examples. This is why it takes a lot of computational power. And all of a sudden, it's able to do a pretty good job of predicting the right answers to those challenges of how to predict the next word. So how do they generate answers like the ones that I showed you before? Well, I use the same mechanism. So I say a 37-year-old woman presents with a 2-week history of dysuria, ... So lots of more text. What diagnoses should be considered? And the answer is that the next word that is generated is the word dysuria. Okay, now why is that the word that's generated? Well, because somehow in this probabilistic model of what words follow what other words, it has learned that that's the correct word after this introduction. Now that introduction can be, by today's standards, up to about 2 million words. So it's not just a simple question, but I can put all sorts of other stuff in there. Okay, so far so good. I then feed in the next word, dysuria, and say what's the next thing generated, and it's a comma. And if I look, what happens is that Copilot, in this case, the Google system, says dysuria or painful urination can be caused by a variety of conditions. It lists a bunch of them. It gives a cautionary note about the need to actually test the patient. Sounds great, okay? Now, my problem is, why does this work? Right? I have not trained this system to give sensible answers to questions like this. I've only trained it to predict the next word in a trillion words of text that it has ingested. Now, as an engineer, I feel mad, angry, frustrated, embarrassed. Normally, when I do engineering, I design something to solve a problem, and I understand how it's to solve that problem. Here, we've designed stuff to learn to predict the next word, and yet it's solving much more complicated, much more difficult problems for us. And we don't know why. So that's the first thing that we don't understand about large language models. I wrote a paper a couple of months ago. I love the title. Large language models seem miraculous, but science abhors miracles. So this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, has a new AI subjournal. And the editor asked me to write sort of a skeptical article about this technology. He, by the way, is a true believer in this technology, and so he wanted me to provide some counterpoint. Now, here's the second mystery. These models make stuff up, okay? So for example, this is a famous one. What are the health benefits of running with scissors? If you have children, you've probably told them not to do that. Well, running with scissors is a cardio exercise, can increase your heart rate, etc. That's probably not a good idea. What about how many rocks should I eat each day? Well, according to UC Berkeley geologists, people should eat at least one small rock a day. And of course, rocks are wonderful. They contain minerals, and our body needs minerals. There is a little practical problem. How do you actually do this? So this is another example. Or here's a question. What is the aspirin time to action? In other words, if I have a headache and I take some aspirin, how long should it take for it to start working? And the answer I get is weird. It's a dose-dependent 2 to 3 hours for small doses or 15 to 30 hours for larger doses. And clearly it's misunderstood the question, because what it's telling me is the elimination half-time. So how long until the aspirin leaves my body? And not at all an answer to the question I'm asking. And then my favorite was last year when I was teaching a lecture on this material in my machine learning for healthcare class. My TA asked the system, ChatGPT in those days, to summarize my research interests and career, and it ended with this sad statement, I'm still here. So the hallucination problem, I kind of sort of understand. The large language models model language use. It's what people might say and not what they know or what's true. So this is along those same lines, prompting. Nowadays, we all prompt. So we teach people how to write prompts in order to get good answers. So if you just say to the model, reason by steps, it improves its reasoning. Okay? Yeah, it's sort of understandable, although I don't know how next word prediction allows it to take that comment and do anything useful with it. Instructions on how to format the answer, for example, if I say identify all meds, procedures, their time, and produce the output as a JSON structure, it will do that. Again, why, how, I don't know. Whole articles relevant to a question. We talked earlier today about RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So the idea is if I ask a medical question, I can do a conventional information retrieval search take all the articles that come back, feed those in as part of that 2 million word prompt, and I'll get better answers. So that sort of makes sense. However, just recently there was a paper that says if I simply take randomly chosen words and add them to the prompt, it improves the answer. Okay, why? I don't know. By the way, one of my students who graduated this year was offered a fantastically lucrative job as a prompt engineer, a job that didn't used to exist 2 or 3 years ago, because this has become something that a lot of people are interested in doing. Long context, if I do feed in 2 million words of context, it's not very good at finding material from that. The large context problem is not well understood and doesn't work very well. And I think probably the last mystery I want to talk about is we don't know how to train these models in the most useful way. So for example, here's one approach. If I want to train a model to be good at clinical data, I can just take tons of clinical notes, pre-train on that, and then fine-tune on whatever inferences I want to make, and then I use my trained model. Or I can start with a specialized clinical model that starts with a general text, something like ChatGPT, do further pre-training on the clinical notes, and then fine-tune. Or I can start on general text and only fine-tune, or just try to use general text and prompting. And here are some problems we applied this to. This is a natural language inference problem, question answering problem, and a problem to essentially translate instructions to a patient into a form that a patient can understand. And what we found is that GPT-3, which at that time was about 175 billion parameter model, didn't do nearly as well as a model that was about 2.5 orders of magnitude smaller, but was trained in particular on medical data. And I think it's interesting that if you listen, for example, to what some of the corporate attempts to harness this technology are now doing, is to say, well, instead of training one giant model that does everything, let's train specialized models for particular domains. And maybe those will be easier to train and they will work better. Although there's a problem, which is we don't know exactly where the boundaries are supposed to be between these models. And we don't have much empirical evidence yet to guide us. So thank you very much. That's the end.